Well, creating art isn't a walk in the park. It's a journey that demands years of practice and an unshakable commitment to finding one's artistic voice. That's why when someone does find a way to work as an artist, such as our guest today, we love celebrating that here. Welcome to Celebrate Michigan, the show produced on the campus of Madonna University. I'm Chris Benson. Today I'm here with our very special guest, Brian Skol, a talented local artist that we're so excited to share with you today. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So how long have you been on this path of being an artist?
It started when I was a little kid, really, and you just start scribbling, and then it's like, oh, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and that was the main goal, be a comic book artist. And then when I finally got into college, I took my first art history class, and my art history teacher, it's big projection screen, and you get like a Caravaggio painting, and it's like life size, and it's like, and I realized like the second I saw that painting, it was like I don't think comics are gonna do it, So since my first art history class, and it was like when I was about 21, I took the fine art path and started studying the old masters and reading history books, and was searching ever since. So I studied in school looking for an education, proper education, for about 8 years before I found an atelier, and then I did 3.5 years at the atelier. So it was quite a journey.
Wow! And explain what that educational journey was like. Like, what do you have to do? What kind of classes do you take?
It was honestly, it was frustrating because a regular college, they kind of don't teach the classical methods. It's kind of like with the contemporary modern thing, and that doesn't have an emphasis on what I was interested in. So it felt like a lot of groping in the dark for a while, So it was like doing more research and moving from, I did about a few years at a community college, and then I went to a university, and then I moved to Chicago, and I went to the American Academy of Art, and there I studied at the Palette and Chisel, and I just kept like searching until I found I was working with a model, and we were talking, and she's like, "Oh, you really sound like this guy who's working at this atelier," and I was like, where is
this?
What is this? Yeah. So I found out where they were, and it was the Ravenswood Atelier, and I met Matt and Magda, and I walked into their studio, and it was like walking into a 19th century atelier. It was like going back in time, and I was like, this is everything I've ever wanted. So I took all my money that I was going to give to the college, and I gave it to them, and then I, that was it. It was the final missing piece, because you kind of try to piece it together. You're like, you have a goal, you look at these paintings, you go to a museum, and you're like, how did they do that? Mm-hmm. And no one knows how to teach you how they did that, right? So you walk into a place where you see paintings that they're working on, the instructors are working on, and it's like a museum, and you're like, so to me it was frustrating until I reached that point, and then it felt like this is the final missing piece. But along the way, when I realized I wasn't going to get what I wanted artistically, I decided to study art history and philosophy, and because those two are interesting. You kind of have to live your life and develop a brain outside of art to be an effective artist, I think. So.
Wow. And I feel like all of those things you described, I can see them coming through in the pieces that you brought here today. And I have so many questions. So there's a piece I'm pointing to here, and there's a lot of green, there's a lot of depth. Yeah. I was taken with this when you brought it in, because I too took art classes, but I can tell you my art does not have that sense of depth. Like, how did you go about even creating something like that?
Oh man, I spent a good couple years. You do about 100 landscapes before start clicking. Yeah, for a couple of years you gotta work at it. And I had some really good teachers, and so the depth you're talking about is called atmospheric perspective. And so that's sort of the principle of, as things recede into space, into the atmosphere, the color diminishes in a certain way. Reds start to diminish, and blues start to come in. And so you play with a sense of depth, gives you that feeling of space, So trying to paint atmosphere, right? Like that's always a fun challenge.
Wow. I mean, you definitely achieved it there. And then I saw that one first, and the one next to it, there has to be a story behind this. And I don't know, being here in the studio and actually being able to see it, I thought it was a photograph. And then I saw the strokes and I said, my word, there is so much detail in that picture. Tell us the story behind that picture.
That's my cousin, and he's got just a fun face. I plan to do a profile of him eventually too. But he's got a fun, kind of a classical face, and so wanting to capture my family, and they've been supportive, and you get all this skill, and it's like, oh, I'm going to paint what I want, and I'm never going to paint you, So I thought, let's start painting my family. So that's sort of like the first portrait in a series of portraits that I'll eventually do with that. But yeah, portraiture is. My goal is to be good at all of it, and portraiture was something I was drawn to from the very beginning. I think some of my first portraits were like caricatures of like, Scottie Pippen, and like back then, when you're a little kid, and ever since then it's been like capturing a likeness. There's really something magical about it, but you're working in really tight margins, so you really have to nail it. You really have to like know how to draw. Drawing is really the foundation to good painting. Everybody, I have students come to me often, and they think they have painting problems, and really they have drawing problems. Most of your painting problems are drawing problems.
Well, and even the facial, so the eyes, they did follow me when I was walking by the picture, and I was like, oh. But when you get close enough and you look, you can see the reflection in the retina or the irises of the eyes, and I thought, oh my gosh, just the detail. I imagine, let me ask, which is harder? Is it portraits or landscapes?
Oh man. Well, you could be about a few feet off drawing a tree and no one's going to care. So there's that. But when you're outside, there is this sense of trying to organize a great degree of complexity. It's almost chaotic, right? You don't know where to focus, you don't know how to focus. And so that's a really important lesson, because how do you it's a question that is relevant not just in the art, is how do you organize overwhelming complexity?
Sure.
Right? And we face that every time we go online.
Yeah.
So you face that when you landscape paint, and so you have to like find the picture in the infinite of nature, and then as you do it, nature starts to open up and you start to see more and perceive more, and so it's really wonderful. But again, nailing a likeness is probably much harder.
I would imagine that the real life person behind that would have some ideas about whether you captured it or not, right? Right? Well, unfortunately, it's time to take a break, but we'll be right back with more from our artist, Brian Skol, when we return. Stay tuned.
They call me Prince like I'm royalty or something. But the places I've lived ain't no palaces. So I don't need grilled salmon or a new scratching post. Just give me a cardboard box and a can of tuna and we're good. You can even change my name. I'm cool being the kitty formerly known as Prince.
Hi, I'm Peter, and there's nothing I love more than sharing vegetables with my friends.
Come on in! Help yourself to anything.
That's why we give our food the utmost respect it deserves. Did you know there are simple steps we can all take to help save food? You can cook it, store it, even share it. Just don't waste it. Because when it comes to food, better ate than never. To learn more, visit SaveTheFood.com.
Marie, you have prediabetes.
Prediabetes? I don't have time to eat right or exercise. I'm a busy mom.
Oh, you're a busy mom.
Yeah.
This is great news. Busy moms never get prediabetes.
Wait, what?
Let me just... Yeah, this is all the people at risk for prediabetes, and way over here, busy moms. No?
Maria, so how's work?
It was fourth period biology. Our students just weren't getting how easily viruses spread. So Miss Bella and I had them role play a zombie virus outbreak. By the time they had all learned the lesson, all the living were dead. Hey, how's your job going?
That big sales meeting I planned? Next year, I might get to go.
Cool.
Welcome back to Celebrate Michigan. I'm Chris Benson, and I'm here with today's guest, Brian Skol. We're discussing all things related to art, the creative process. We talked through a couple of the pieces that you created and brought with you today. I wanted to shift over to this one again. What inspired this, and how long did it take to create? I'm so interested in that part.
Yeah, that was about 4 days worth of work.
Oh, gosh.
But it spread out over the course of maybe like a couple weeks, because I like to work in various stages, and with oil painting being what it is, it can take some time to dry. Yeah. So if you set yourself up strategically, you can, at this point, I can say this now, at this point you can get through it quicker if you know what you're doing. So yeah, about 4 days. But those are roses from our garden. My wife has a great garden, and I take advantage of it, and those two roses, it's amazing when, off the same plant, and they looked so different. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, and so yeah, I had to paint them. And I like painting flowers, and they seem to sell well, and that's important too. So it's important to find the thing you like that runs along with what people want. And if you can do that, you're in a good spot.
Well, and we, in the intro to the show, we talked about this idea of being able to make a life out of art, and there's that joke, that is persistent and unfortunate that, a starving artist, but it sounds like you've been able to figure that path out, and as you just said, it's what are people interested in? Because if you're creating and you're independently wealthy, that's great, right? But if you're not, what do you do?
Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. It's the most difficult thing I've ever attempted to do, both in learning the skill, and then once I got the skill and let that sink in, because I never thought I would get the skill, and then it was like, what do I do with it? In a realistic way, because it's like, I want to paint grand narratives. And it's like, but no one wants to buy those, so you have to be like, okay. Compromise, right? And it takes time to figure out. You have to really, and it involves having experiences. The best way to figure something out is, you work according to your temperament, and you have to have those experiences and the feedback to sort of teach yourself, is this right for me? Because sometimes you think you want something, and then you try it, and you're like, this is not for me. So and you're gonna find that in the arts across the board, and so it's just about, okay, well, that doesn't work, let's go over here, so.
Being willing to adapt, and I think that word compromise that you used, it's like, am I selling out, or am I finding a way to keep doing what I love doing in a way that feeds you? Yeah,
and adaptation. That's key, right? Yeah. And especially not only in the practice, but in how you function outside of the practice, So you have to be both adaptable, but also open and curious and willing to learn, so.
And you've been innovative, I understand, and I'd love to hear the story behind the last picture over here on my left, because I understand it will help illustrate the innovation.
Yeah, that's what's called a Charles Bargue drawing, and Charles Bargue created an art program at the turn of the 19th century to help really codify the classical arts and to create a really comprehensive way to go from simple to complex, from drawing to painting. And so when you're doing a sort of classical training, Bargue drawing is the first step, and that's sort of like old school, like you're just copying the masters, right? That was the last Bargue drawing I did, and it was horrible. it was very hard. It's very difficult. But you finish it, and it's something that you can be proud of. But so that ties into, the art school that a good friend of mine, Richard, and I decided to build over the course of the pandemic. So we'd been joking around because I went to the Ravenswood atelier with him, and it was just this ongoing joke of, let's move to Poland and buy a church and start a school, Well, he lived in Michigan. He happened to move back to Michigan because family was here, so we both found ourselves in Michigan, and we're sitting around, and the pandemic was just getting started, and I'm like, we've been joking around about this dream for ever, it's now or never, you know, we're not getting any younger. And so he had just bought some property, and so we had things to work with. We had managed to buy everything before all the prices went up, and then over the course of a year and a half, 2 years roughly, we built the school. And so now we're 2 years, because I have about 10 years of experience in the trades, and he's got some experience in the trades too. So it kind of came together where like what I didn't know how to do, he could do, and back and forth. So it worked out really well.
And so tell me about the school.
Yeah, it's the Detroit Realists of Art Atelier. We originally started maybe about 6-7 years ago in Hamtramck. Doing open model sessions and workshops and whatnot, and then after the pandemic hit, there was that lull, so the Classical Atelier is really a program. We like to joke around and we call it like a military school for the arts, right? Because it's very rigorous,
yes.
You know. But the discipline you get taught is much the same kind of discipline you have to have for yourself once you're out. So you learn to walk that tightrope, as we were talking about before, and you really learn the discipline and how to work on something for long periods of time. You learn how to see mistakes. You learn how to be self-critical in a way that gets you to be reliant on your own skills after you leave. So the biggest problem is, how do you critique yourself? You know, and so how do you change the frame that you're seeing things with so that you can make improvements as you go? So it's a whole process, and you progress based on your own skill. So if you understand a concept and you can prove it through your work, through an exercise, then you can move on. You know, and that's it. And and if you hit a wall, then you're there until you move on.
Oh, how painful that must be.
So, yeah, but it's also very rewarding, because you know that as you progress through the system, you're progressing on your own skill, and you're really, by teaching, and I'm a big fan. I really like teaching, because you get these aha moments where you're looking and you're learning, and you're learning about somebody to an extent that like you help them see something new, and then they have the aha moment.
So inspiring. It's time for another break. Don't worry, we'll be right back, and we'll talk more about the creative process. Stay tuned.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
Nice. No. Oops. Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Moms everywhere are finding ways to keep kids active and healthy.
Works every time.
Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
So there you are, shuffling through a stack of resumes, and you come to mine. This is it. First impression. My way in. But can my resume show you how I truly stand out? Like that I was studying, going to night school while working 2 jobs just to help my parents pay for groceries. Or being the first one to always step up. No, that's something you just can't put on paper. Look beyond the resume and discover new ways to develop great talent that is dedicated, hardworking, and determined like me.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
Welcome back to Celebrate Michigan. I'm Chris Benson, and we've been talking with a very talented artist, Brian Skol. Brian, creative process. Talk about your thoughts on it.
Oh, the creative process, making a painting. I mean, you go through like hundreds of sketches sometimes. Some paintings take years to, you have a little idea and you sit on it for a couple of years and then you develop it, and a couple of years later and then I'm ready, and then you can do it, and then sometimes it just happens. So it's kind of like, but when it just happens, it's because of all the preparation you've done and everything else, So it's it is all over the place sometimes, So, but when you're working on something in general, and this ties back to the classical method, it's good to start, with the whole, with the big shape, with the big composition, and then you work down to the details. Where people go wrong is they start with the details.
That's where I would start.
Yeah, yeah. 'Cause that's the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to get to you have to earn your way to the details.
Oh, I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
You are a good teacher.
Oh, thank you.
Oh. So I have to ask, I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who are seeing these pieces and they're getting inspired.
Yeah.
Is there someone who's inspired you? How did you get inspired to take up this journey?
Yeah, so not long after I saw the, Caravaggio on the screen, I was up in the Milwaukee Institute of Art, and it was a painting by William Bouguereau, and it was Homer being led by the blind, and I had no idea. I mean, it's the first and only painting I've ever cried in front of, because it was like, that was it. It solidified it for me forever. I was like, I didn't know a human was capable of creating such beautiful
Absolutely.
thing, right? Just the colors, the composition, just the whole thing was so naturalistic. And so it was just like, like how little kids watch movies over and over and over again, they're trying to get something out of it. I just kept going back to this painting over and over and over again, and standing in front of it, trying to figure out, okay, this is what I have to do, So yeah, Bouguereau kind of really started it all, and then from there, then you find all these other artists that you're a big fan of,
I can relate to that feeling of emotion. I was sharing during the break that I had just come back from a trip and seen the art in the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica, and just, I don't have words to describe it. I mean, the scope and the scale of it is makes you feel so humble and small. But then when you see the artistry that goes into it, I can relate to that feeling.
Yeah, designed to really inspire awe, right? And that's what its purpose was, right? So you walk into the church and you're supposed to, right? And so that's really what they really did it. They really did it, right? I mean, it's amazing to see. And so that's sort of been like, to me, there's pieces in the world and in museums that artists still don't know how to make. And so to me, that's a personal challenge. I walk in there and I'm like, I want to know how to do it, right?
Sure. So when you're, doing a piece, do you think of what you want the piece to say to you, or do you ever think of how you want people to react to the piece, that awe you just mentioned?
Yeah. I think if you're worried about how other people are going to respond, it doesn't feel right. You don't get the right results. I mean, you always need feedback from other people, no doubt, but you have to go with, what's going on, there, and what's driving you. And so that's part of the process, is to dig into what you're passionate about, what you want to say. And for me, it was never like, I never really had to try really hard. I have just stacks of notebooks of just compositions that hopefully I can get to. So for me, some people, they have to try really hard, or they have to try harder, and that's okay. But I've always just, the ideas just come to me, they just flash, and it's like, okay, and I just put it down, and I'll get to that when I have the talent to get to it,
Sure.
So.
I love how you said that, when I have the talent to get to it. Not the time, but.
Well, I mean, you know what it's like to bite off more than you can chew, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than having a failure at something that you want to turn out excellent, So yeah, there were projects that I did a painting about Shakespeare, or Hamlet, and I had the idea for the painting when I was a little kid, and so, but it took me going through art school and getting, and I'm in my 30s, and I'm finally, okay, I'm going to do this
now
painting.
It is. Yes. Where can our audience members find you if they want to know more about the school or about the works that you have available?
Yeah, everything that I'm about as far as teaching goes is at the draatelier.com. And then for everything else, my Instagram is Brian Skol Art. It's pretty simple. So
for those watching today who might be thinking, gosh, it's been a long time. I took a couple like me, I took a couple classes in high school. Maybe I'll, take this up again. What would you say to them as they're thinking like, gosh, I don't know, maybe?
Do it, create. You have to, and it doesn't matter how bad you think it is. Just keep creating and keep trying to do better, and always pick something that's just beyond your skill.
Oh, say that again.
Always pick something that is just beyond your skill.
Why?
Because it's just hard enough to engage you, so that maybe it's achievable, and if it's achievable, you get the fuel to do the next one. It's very common to bite off more than you can chew, and then you get very discouraged and you never pick it back up again. So you want to set attainable goals that you have a goal and you try to reach for that goal in the project, But, just keep drawing. Draw what you see. Go out in nature. You have to be curious. You have to be a naturalist. You have to explore.
Brian, I feel like so many things that you said today apply to art, but also to life. So I can definitely call you, hopefully you don't mind, a philosopher artist.
Thank you very much.
It's been
great.
A pleasure having you today.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And it's time to go. I can't believe it's already time for us to transition off. Thank you so much for watching Celebrate Michigan, where we celebrate all the wonderful things that are happening in the Mitten State. Until next time, I'm Chris Benson.